patiently and waiting to tackle this very, very sensitive topic, very important topic. Where's Kenya going from here? The abductions have just gotten out of control. And we're going to be talking to these gentlemen right here in the studios. Irungu Houghton, the director of Amnesty International Kenya, Charles Owino, former National Police Services spokesman, and on the screen behind us on Zoom live, Maria Sarungi, who was abducted in broad daylight 4 days ago and released after an outcry, not just from Kenya, but from around the region and around the world. Maria, tell us about that ordeal. What was it like? What happened? What exactly happened?
Well, it was a normal Sunday afternoon, and I had actually gone to have my hair done. It wouldn't say, but it's very tidy right now. But what happened is armed men blocked my Uber. I actually was using a ride-hailing app to call a cab, and I saw two men. Of course, later I was told there were three who jumped out of the car, but I saw two men on both sides of the door. They ran, they were masked, they were wearing baseball hats. Based on what I know in terms of, I've been reading, of course, and seeing a lot of reports, I immediately knew this was an abduction. They were shouting at the driver to open the door, and I was screaming at the driver not to open the door. They managed to open the door and they dragged me. I put up a fight because I knew if they put me in the vehicle, I'll be in utter danger. Immediately, while even I was not properly in the vehicle, they started speeding away. Within a very short time, while I was struggling and I was also putting up a fight, and they were also pushing down my head not to see what is happening, there was a jolt. We all at the back sort of fell forward. What I managed to see, because they were trying to block my view, was I saw what now I know is a city hopper. I just saw a green and yellow big bus, and it was blocking the road. They were trying to swerve, and the driver was moving the bus to block their way. I heard in the car in Kiswahili the word bunduki. I didn't see the weapon because by then they saw that my head was up and pushed me down. I was kicking at the window. I was trying to see if I could break the window, which I couldn't. Another one sat on my legs, and then we sped away. And for hours, we were driving and stopping about 5 times. I was trying to count how many times we've stopped. There was hardly communication among them. There was no radio call or anything, but it was clear the person in front was getting out, having some form of discussion or calls. I was not sure. I was blindfolded throughout. They did try immediately afterwards, when they had abducted me, to get my devices. They took my first main phone and they were demanding the PIN codes. I, of course, gave them rubbish numbers, and you know, they sort of were getting very aggressive, and that's where they really hurt my wrists, because they were using the metal handcuffs to tighten them every time I gave them the wrong PIN. I was screaming in the end. I was asking them to give me time to calm down, to remember the PIN. They kept saying they're police. They're taking me to a police station, but I knew that was completely not true. And I was telling them that you've abducted me. That made them even more angry. They said they did not abduct me. After a while, when they picked up a lot of speed and after a few stops, I knew that I was in a vehicle that was going outside Nairobi. I could feel on the bumps that this was getting worse and worse. After a while, I mean, honestly, I was fighting, but after a while, I just knew, even if I would, let's say, manage to break free, I can't jump out of such a high-speeding car. I calmed down a bit. I did a lot of praying. I'm not ashamed to say that. I did a lot of prayers, and I was just, holding on tight. I did have questions targeted at me, asking my name. I refused to give them my name. I told them that they should know who they abducted, and I asked them, what did they tell them before they abducted me? The person sitting in front on the passenger side knew me by name and kept, calling me sometimes unexpectedly in the silence, or try to make conversations with me in Swahili, but I refused to speak Swahili for a very strategic reason. I felt that if they don't know my name, or they don't know who I am, or they've just been sent on an assignment, I need to keep confusing them. Toward a few more stops, is when I realized something was not wrong. They asked me if I have a husband, which sort of gave me an alert that, my husband may be finally out, knowing that I'm abducted and trying to push things. And also the stops became more frequent, and finally they did release me with the condition that I cannot look at them, I cannot turn around until they disappeared, and then I was supposed to just find my way home and not talk to anyone. I did feel that I was being watched, but of course, again, I was very disoriented and extremely vulnerable and scared. I think that bit was the most, the time when I didn't know whether now this is a good ending or a bad ending, but I did finally manage to get back to our apartment.
Maria, real quick, where did they dump you off, for lack of a better word? Do you remember? Do you know where?
I don't know. What I do know is it was dark, and it was outside Nairobi, but I was walking toward where most of the cars were coming from, because I imagine that's where they stay. When I got into one of the parked Ubers, and it took me quite a while because I was stopping vehicles and asking them if they're an Uber, I got in and I didn't want to speak to the driver. I was still worried that they might be trailing me, asking questions could, become a problem. So I was just trying to see after a while, when I felt a little bit more relaxed, I tried to see my environment, and I did realize I was on Gong Road. And when I asked the driver pointed out that's where Junction is, so that's the part that I came from. So I came from that area. I'm not sure what that area is, but from the angle, I was seeing the Carrefour sign and Gong.
And they were all hooded, these guys were all hooded?
They were wearing masks and baseball caps up to here. I could only see one person's eye before they tied my eyes, and they tied it very hard. And as I said, there was one who was on my left. His job was to make sure that if not hooded, they would press me down. They would sometimes cover and tell me to keep quiet, at least twice. And I felt that there was something going on. I assume it was a roadblock or some sort of inspection, because they were really adamant that I cannot move, I cannot breathe, I have to remain very quiet, which then, led me to some questions why they would do that, but I was scared that in case I do, they could harm me more.
Yeah. Irungu, this is harrowing. This is harrowing. I mean, if that happened to you or me, or maybe even Charles,
his heart would stop.
His heart would stop, honestly.
So he's a seasoned police officer, it won't stop. And I think you have to look at this from a different way. If you listen to Billy Mwangi, this young 20-year-old who was held for 3 weeks before he was released last week on Monday, he came out of a barber's shop and he was really preparing to go to church. He, after church, he watches football with his father. He's really a young man, very decent man. And I had an opportunity to meet him when we were taking him to DCI to give his statement as was required by the court. Or if you listen to somebody like Peter Muteti, who was picked up as he was at a M-Pesa vendor. These are very, I would just say, very humble young people. Yeah. The weight of the state that has been applied to essentially forcibly abduct them, to hold them for weeks on end, to deny them water, to deny them food, access to a lawyer, not to present them in a court of law, as is required by our laws. There's probably about 15 crimes, not just under our laws, but even under international laws, that the abductors have carried out. And I think the story that we've heard from Maria, is just so dramatic because, in a sense, she was 2.5 hours away from the Namanga border. If it had been just one more hour before the alarm had gone out to the international community, to Kenyans, to Tanzanians, and if, for example, people like the city hopper driver had not tried to intervene, we would have a different conversation now. She would not be available to do interviews like this. She would be back in Tanzania and probably incommunicado. So I think we have to start by looking at what is going wrong. I want to come back to Charles's comment about where, this is a good time for national security. In the last 3 years, we've had a mass trauma event. We had the case of the Yala bodies. We've had the case of Shakahola, the biggest massacre reported, in a non-conflictual, non-war time in Kenya's history. And we had the bodies that showed up in Kware in Nairobi. We've had, as you've mentioned, not just 85 people abducted, but we've had 120 deaths of protesters in the 2 years of protest, the Sufuria Revolution and more recently, the Gen Z Revolution. And I think we have to say, let me just actually put this in historical context. Do you know how many people died fighting for multipartyism? It is actually a third of the number we have lost in the last 2 years. Right? So even comparatively, we're actually facing a very difficult time. If there was a poll today, and maybe this is something that, I don't know if our pollists are watching this, but the pollsters, if you did a poll and said, who are you more frightened of, Al-Shabaab or the National Intelligence Service? I wonder what that would look like.
Charles, the ball is right in your court right there.
It's okay. Most importantly, it's not good to mix up issues. We were talking about alleged abductions.
Alleged? How are they alleged? You've just heard one
just give me time.
testimony. I'm just worried about the language. Language matters.
I was quiet.
You are, and let me give you that space.
So just give me that
Go ahead.
space.
But please use words that are respectful for the victims.
Yes.
I'm not an activist. My background, I'm an officer of the law. An officer of the law is somebody who enforces laws and regulations as it applies. So I cannot talk about abduction. I can talk about alleged abductions because these terms have different meanings. When you say somebody has been abducted, somebody has been arrested, they have different meanings. And I cannot stand here and say abductions. I would be wrong. What I'm saying, we've talked about Yala bodies, we've talked about Shakahola. These things happened in different regimes and we discussed them. I would have wished that we restrict ourselves without mixing issues. I just said before that we have done so well comparatively to any other time before in general security matters. And I'm happy you have just mentioned
facts or figures that can bolster that?
The facts I can talk about is
number of deaths of protesters.
We had a lot of protesters we'll talk about if you want us to talk about that.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, give me time to explain myself. If you look at the general security of the country, previously we had a lot of issues with terrorism and Al-Shabaab, and we discussed that with you, even when I was actively in service, on issues of terrorists, complaints about persons even disappearing those particular periods and so on and so forth. We have had issues with cattle rustling and so on and so forth. And now we have these issues of abductions, and I would want us to discuss them objectively as a country. I cannot, personally, I have children, I have relatives, I cannot support an action that is illegal. That is number one. But we must look at issues objectively and look at the country in its holistic nature when we are discussing. Because we may rush to say certain things that can put the country in a more worse situation than what we are. Because these ones can be resolved. And you've had politicians make very crazy statements on this. And that is why I say, let us not politicize. And I'm happy you have mentioned the National Intelligence Service. Houston is one of the closest friends to the Director of Intelligence.
Just to be clear, my name is Houghton.
Houghton.
Houston is a city in Texas.
Fine, it doesn't matter.
Just let me own it.
Yes. we are not Muzungus.
Yeah. Yes.
But anyway.
Your name is Charles.
Whatever. No, that's easy. Not like Houston.
No, please, let's stay with
So what I'm saying, this gentleman is one of the closest friends to the Director of Intelligence in this country. They worked very closely when he was DPP, and they carried out a lot of reforms. And I'm sure he has better, faster, able access to him. And let me tell you, National Intelligence Service is the secret service of this country. It's a very important service to us. Collects intelligence and also manages counter-intelligence in this country. And we must be very careful.
Sure.
We must be very careful. We are talking about our country. And there's nothing wrong pointing on items or actions which we think are not right.
Let me ask you real quick,
Just a
Charles.
minute, let me
Real quick.
finish. No, let me finish. We've talked about 85 people so far allegedly abducted. Last week we saw a number of people appearing.
Allegedly released?
No, appearing.
Allegedly released.
No, appearing.
I'm trying to use your language.
Yes.
No, appearing.
Charles,
saying, no.
Let's stick on NIS.
Jeff.
Can I ask you real quick?
No, before
And actually, I'd like to respond to that.
It's okay.
Who does NIS report to?
NIS reports to National Security Council and reports to the President of the Republic and shares their intelligence reports to security organs of the country, including DCI and including National Police Service.
So when Justin Muturi says that his son was abducted by the NIS, and the only way the son was released was when he talked to the president, and the president called the DG of NIS, and then an hour later his son was released. What does that tell you?
Number one, it's a careless statement from a minister.
Come on, Charles.
Yes, listen to me.
Come on.
Listen to me. And listen to me carefully.
A CS making a careless statement like that?
Yes.
Former Attorney General?
Former Attorney General?
Member of the National Security Council?
Let me tell you why I am saying that. He has breached the trust of the president. And that is why I told you, Jeff, we can have our differences, but we must be very careful on how we release these matters. I want to tell you something about cabinet, which you understand. Sometimes in the cabinet, you can disagree to agree. And usually what happens in the cabinet is that when you leave the cabinet meeting and a decision is made, you have only two alternatives. To go by that decision, and if not, to resign. The CS has been a Speaker of the National Assembly. The CS has been Attorney General and member of National Security
Council. Yep.
The CS, and if this is true, because I've not carried out investigation and I'm not privy to the information, if it is true that he got information that his child was with NIS people, and it is true he went to the president, and the president called. The president is a symbol of national unity. And Jeff, I can tell you, the president, out of trust and out of respect, because I told you, intelligence is an important organ which is a secret agency of the country. You may not know, and you know they don't have a voice. They cannot come here and talk. They cannot explain certain things. They may have sensitive information or issues, matters that may want to get from a particular individual. Remember, it's not an ordinary thing. A son of a CS picked, allegedly, I can say so, because I'm not properly privy. I've not talked to DG to tell me.
I don't know if I can just jump in.
Yes, jump in.
Because he has made up a...
You made your point.
Yeah,
Let me
all right,
respond.
fine.
Given that we're allegedly here in this studio.
Yes.
Allegedly.
No.
And given that...
We are here.
Charles, we are here. Okay.
Don't make a mockery.
And given that Charles is choosing my friends for me.
Yes.
Let me start by just, I guess, clarifying the nature of Amnesty International's relationship with the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, Nuruddin Haji, Irongo Houghton. We worked very closely with the ODPP. We are very proud of 3 areas of work. The first was the decisions to charge. That was a very important process that was developed in order to make sure that the prosecution is fair in the prosecutions that they undertake, particularly in the cases where police have been involved in human rights abuses. The second area we worked very closely on was the area of anti-terrorism guidelines, because what we were finding was that counter-terrorism efforts were essentially unlawful. People were being abducted and held. And I remember distinctly taking a list of 35 people who had disappeared, allegedly for terrorism charges, to the then Interior Minister in the presence of a number of imams and the Law Society of Kenya. And we demanded that these people either be charged in a court of law or they be released. 5 people were released within 2 weeks of that conversation with the Interior Minister, right? So what we are seeing now with JB Muturi and the President is not something that has not happened before. And I think it's important to recognize that actually the tools and the strategies that have been used against Gen Z protesters are really tools that were designed for hardened, dangerous terrorists. And my question is, why are we using those methods on essentially peaceful protesters, first and foremost, cartoonists, and thirdly, people who have no criminal record or any act of violence that can be attributed to them? So this was our relationship, if I can make that clear. We will continue to engage the ODPP currently. We will continue, but it is always from a position of human rights principles. Let's come back to JB Muturi. I don't think you can dismiss his statement as an alleged as allegation, because he is a credible, authoritative person of responsibility in the government of Kenya. Not just in this government, but in successive previous governments. So he's not just a random individual. And I think what I've seen now is the political class are starting to divide this story on the basis of ethnicity. The Somalis are being attacked, or they're saying he's about to be removed from office, or he's about to resign. And I think we have to just stay very clearly in the area of the truth. And the truth is this, is a very credible source has gone to the police station at the request of the DCI to give evidence on his own son's abduction. He has named the director of the National Intelligence Services. My question to people, and I hope people actually out now are looking at the National Intelligence Security Act, because the act is very clear. Article 5 says that the National Intelligence Service has no capacity to run operations. It is an intelligence gathering institution. Its job is to support lawful policing against terrorists, against hardened criminals, narcotic smugglers, and so on. I think the other place that Kenyans now need to look at is Article 25 of the Act. It provides for a complaints commission. But I don't think at this point we actually have a complaints commission. A place where citizens can go and say, I am deeply disturbed by the naming of the Director General of the National Intelligence Services, and I want to figure out what is happening. I honestly believe that one of the things that needs to happen next is for the Director General to essentially produce his own statement to clarify to the nation what actually happened. If that is not possible, then the other people who are named there, including the head of state, need to also explain whether that phone call took place or not.
Hold on, John, hold on. And none of them have spoken yet. No, especially about JB Muturi's son or about Maria Sarungi's abduction. And I want to take a break and come back and talk more. Maria, you still with us? You're still with us, I see you, okay. I want to find out, why do you think you were abducted, Maria? Why? And by the way, were those guys Tanzanian or Kenyan? Could you tell? Walikuwa wakiongea Swahili sanifu ama Swahili wa bara.
Sorry, I thought you said you're coming back because there's something coming up. So very quickly.
No, Maria, we are coming back. We are coming. Yes, okay. Stand by. Okay. Stand by. We're going to take a short break. Come back. We're still talking about abductions, folks, and what's going on. Who's in charge? Are there rogue elements in this government that we don't know about? Hey, you do the math. Keep tweeting at Queen Jeff, at Citizen TV. The hashtag is JKLIVE. JKLIVE takes a break. We'll be back very shortly. Stay tuned.